Another game we've both kind of like touched on somewhat. After a year and a bit delay due to actual war, we finally have Advanced Wars. What is the full title of this? Advanced Wars 1+2 Rearmed?
Reboot Camp.
Reboot Camp, that's the one.
That is the one.
So I've never played Advanced Wars before this on the GBA and whatever. I've always known of its existence and always known that so many games are inspired by it. Great games like Into the Breach, heavily inspired by it. Most tile-based games, Advanced Wars kind of like inspired. So it's very cool to play the progenitor of those sorts of games. And interesting to see that the game is very, I'm not going to say basic. It's basic in terms of the numbers it uses. Like every unit starts at like 10. They do X amounts of damage. And you know that, hey, okay, if they're in this vehicle, they will do this amount of damage. If they're on a mountain, they will do this amount of damage. Or they will receive this amount of damage.
Yeah.
You know, all of that stuff. But then it starts getting very complex very quickly with the amount of units you have available, the sort of rock, paper, scissors you're playing with air units versus ground units versus sea units versus units in a building versus units in a mountain versus this versus that. And it's a really deep strategy game that I'm quite enjoying. What's your take on this?
Yeah, no, I feel the same. When it starts, I was a bit taken aback because I always thought Advance Wars was a DS game. But that actually existed on the Game Boy Advance.
Way before, way before.
And I had the same reaction you did of, oh, okay, it's weird that in sets of infantry, people have 10 health and so does a tank. Because in my head, strategy games are, I don't know, an infantry unit is 3 health, a tank's like 20 health. You know what I mean? But you start to realize how the depth comes in with, like you mentioned, different terrains, how you choose to attack your enemies. Almost, it is kind of like a rock, paper, scissors thing of, you know, a tank is definitely going to destroy a light vehicle. A light vehicle is going to destroy infantry. However, infantry with rocket launchers can take on tanks. If you want to boil it down as like a dumb example like that. But they very quickly start introducing more depth. Like I was saying to you before we started recording, because I think I'm about 4 or 5 hours in already, you eventually get air units and then later you get sea units. So now, I mean, I'm still early in the campaign, but I imagine when you start bringing them all together, it's going to be, okay, how do I balance, you know, dominating sea versus keeping an eye on the sky and making sure I don't give up too much territory on land? You know, how do I bring all these units together in the most effective way possible? I mean, and even over and above that, I don't know how far you're on the campaign, but do you know what buildings do? Because when you start the campaign, they're like, this is how you capture a building, and they don't tell you what purpose it really serves other than, you know, if your tank's injured, you can park it at the building, it'll heal. Isn't it also like an attrition thing? Like the more buildings you have, like I know some missions like capturing certain buildings or certain bases are actually like a victory condition. Yes, I did a level yesterday. It was like whoever captures 12 buildings first wins.
Exactly.
But you get some levels where the number of buildings you own dictates the amount of currency you earn every turn. And then eventually you get buildings that let you train units per turn. So
you get more units onto the battlefield?
Yeah. So
wow, that's almost like an RTS then.
So I mean, and that's very, it's not every level is like that. Because when they introduced it, I thought, oh, okay, I guess I'm training units every level from now on. And it's not that. There are still, it's a fair mix of, here's a level where, like I said earlier, you need to capture 12 buildings. And you can train units to obviously keep feeding this back and forth balance between you and the enemy. Versus a level where it's like, okay, we need you to like either destroy the enemy units or capture the HQ, and you've got 15 units to do that with versus their 15 units. Like, be strategic about it. So it's a very cool mix. And then, just looking at the video footage now, over and above that, you have what's called a CO, a commanding officer, who every couple turns they get to use a special ability, which itself can also change the flow of battle in interesting ways. So Andy, the first CO you get, I think his ability is he heals units across the map for 2 HP, and then they get a little bit of extra firepower. There's another guy you get who I think he basically ramps up the firepower your tanks do. So like there's a lot. It's funny because I know talking about it, if you're listening, you know nothing about Advance Wars, you go, oh my God, that is so much to keep track of.
Yeah.
But it's weird because it's a Nintendo game. They make it very palatable. Like, no doubt there's a lot of depth. But the way the campaign is structured, it really spoon feeds you things like in a simple fashion that before you know it, you are doing all these things and you become aware of, oh, I know how to engage, you know, a group of tanks versus infantry, etc., etc. And it's really, really addictive. Like, there's a reason I've put 5 hours in like the last 2 days. I've had things where, I think
they do a great job of like onboarding you. I've seen some people who've played Advance Wars before be a bit like irritated by it because there's no way to actually skip it. So if you've like played Advance Wars before, the tutorial feels very extended and there's no way of avoiding it. But if you're coming in fresh, there's like lots to do.
But even on that, I can speak to the fact that they have streamlined some things. I think the first 3 like tutorial missions are unskippable. Like, I get that. But you do get to later missions where, like I said, they introduce air units and you go, oh my God, like air units. And the pop-up is, hey, do you remember how to use air units? And you can say yes or no. So assuming if you say
that's cool.
Yes, they go like, okay, cool, like do the mission.
So it's weird that they let you skip that, but they don't let you like skip the basics of here's how to move a unit. Either way, I get the sense that Advance Wars 2 is actually a significantly more fun game than the first one. But I've definitely started with the first one because I just kind of want to see, you know, what that's about. And the first one's like 20 hours or so. So
I'm already 27% through the campaign. So that checks out, I guess. If you're looking at 5 hours it took me to get there.
It's really fun and like you said, palatable is I think a good descriptor because it's like you play a level or 2 a night. They don't last super long. Well, they don't take like an hour each, you know what I mean? Whereas, you know, if you're coming from something like Fire Emblem, those battles can last quite some time. And there's a lot less jeopardy in Advance Wars. It's like the mission either you victory or fail. You know, there's no like units progressing through one or the other that you have to keep track of. So it is a very focused, like, this is turn-based strategy. This is what you're doing. And I think it's good. I think the only negative I have is I really don't like the visual style. I think you
ruined it for me.
Not good. The character portraits that come up when people are talking and during like the cutscenes, like that animated style.
I like that.
Really cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. But like the polygonal style that they've taken here, because obviously the original is more pixels or sprite art. Sorry. This one just looks like I'm sorry, it's like a cheap mobile game. It looks terrible. It really, really does.
When you mentioned that in the Discord, I read, I was like, how dare you? And then I was like, how dare you? Because now I can't unsee it.
I'm very sorry. I just...
Yeah, it does.
When they show that like side by side for the battles, I'm like, this looks like an Instagram ad for a like mobile army game. Like it just looks so terrible.
Yeah, like I've never played the original, but it feels like more could have been done on that front.
Yeah. I can't compare it as in terms of like, did they maintain the visual style? But from what I've heard other people talk about it, everyone's kind of like they should have stuck to sprites because this kind of doesn't look that great. And I tend to agree. It looks cheap, which you shouldn't be saying about a full price Switch game, especially one, you know, for a beloved like a franchise like this. So that's a bummer. But other than that, the gameplay, like, it's very easy to overlook because it's just super fun to play. Yeah. So, and perfectly again suited for the Switch. So, yeah.
It's definitely going to keep me busy for the next 2 weeks before Tears of the Fallen Kingdom. I need to wrap it up. Also,
Tears of the Fallen Kingdom is 2 weeks away. Jesus,
it's crazy. But yeah, Advance Wars,
the OLED Switch is already out. People have it in their hands.
It's like gorgeous. But yeah,
my God,
Advance Wars.
Can't wait.
It's funny because like I said, I always thought it was a DS game. I remember seeing it on the DS. I remember looking up reviews and people going, wow, Advance Wars really good. Never played it. So it's cool that I finally have had the opportunity to see why people say this is one of Nintendo's like most underrated franchises.
Yeah. And people are so happy that it's back. I know Darren, for example, super man, Darren really loves his turn-based games. I never really pictured it for him when I first met him, but over the years, as I've got to know him, like loves Fire Emblem, loves Advanced Wars.
The dude's got a Final Fantasy 8 tattoo on his
loves Final Fantasy Tactics, and he's fucking good at these games. Like, yeah,
it's good.
Whenever I mention I'm having trouble in Fire Emblem, he's just like, for shame.
You say, Darren Sensei, teach me.
Yeah, senpai, please. That's Advance Wars. I definitely will be playing more of that as the weeks go on, but I think that's a fairly robust look at how the game works. And if you've been eagerly waiting, barring the art, it's a really good game, I think. So, yeah.